Welcome to episode 429 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and he's Rafa Aldamuy. And actually, Rafa, believe it or not, we do actually have quite a bit to talk about today. It's transfers, it's a Copa match, and a few other things too. Are you ready?
I was born ready, Dan. Let's go.
Well, before we get to, I think the second half is what we're looking forward to for the Copa match. Of course, the 5-0 against Ceuta. But looking at the first half, we'll put that off for a second. Instead, we're going to do Memphis Depay because he is off to Atletico Madrid. He's actually already there in training. They had pictures. So Memphis is gone from Barcelona. And I think the year and a half he was here, it's going to be a little easier with some of these other players who weren't here very long. And we actually were talking about some names beforehand. Arturo Vidal, like that's a kind of name where, and those matches that he played in because Messi was still around, were a bit more high profile than the ones that Memphis played in, unfortunately for Barcelona. But yeah, I almost put Memphis in that kind of category as Arturo Vidal, where it's like, are we going to remember, unless you're Chilean, of course, are we ever going to remember Arturo Vidal as some grand superstar of this era in this generation? Not really. Like from a South American sense, of course, again, he was maybe one of the two greatest Chilean players, at least in the 21st century, along with Alexis Sanchez. But yeah, he's kind of going to be one of those afterthoughts, especially for Barcelona. And for Memphis, it's going to be the same thing. Like Memphis, to give you the rundown here, arrived for free from Lyon. Of course, his wages were rather low, not insanely low. It's not like he took a huge pay cut like Eric Garcia did on a free to come to Barcelona. He and Kessie were compensated pretty well. We know that Lewandowski is compensated pretty well to fit in that new wage structure. But yeah, so he comes for free from Lyon, plays 42 matches in 1.5 seasons, 14 goals and 2 assists. He won the Spanish Super Cup, of course, but didn't feature in that. That's his one and only trophy. He was Barcelona's top scorer last season, so in the 2021-22 season. However, of the 42 matches he played, he also missed 29 games due to injury, and now he is leaving for 3 to 5 million euros, likely more 3 to 4, and Barcelona are getting him off their books. They're likely going to save a little bit in financial fair play, not enough to do anything, but he will save a little bit on FFP. Again, they get just a small transfer fee. And apparently they also get a buy option on a 30-year-old Yannick Carrasco. So we can talk about that too. But yeah, for Memphis, if you're going to give it a grade, and we'll do the old English school system of A, B, C, D, F. I did it. I got it. I never got an E, understandably. Hey, I was an A student, so I don't want to hear it. I never looked past C. We're not talking about that here.
Honestly, I would give him a B. Because I think we have to put into context who he played with during when he got to Barcelona. I would say sadly for him, he played with probably the worst supporting cast I think anyone could have played in an attacking role during, let's say, the last 20 years or something like that at Barcelona. He played with Luke de Jong. He played with Stanis Padrola, with Ilyas Akomash, with the winger
Abde and Jugla.
Yeah. Obviously,
yeah.
The thing is, obviously, compared to like the attacking line that we've had for the past 15 to 20 years, that he didn't play with absolutely anybody of name. Not to take anything away from Abde. I love Abde. Jugla. I love Jugla. But the thing is, we gotta be in Spanish justo. We say that in Spanish. With him, he was the main focal point of our offense when our team was completely horrible. That was before Xavi, the last few months of Koeman, when our defense was horrible as well, when we basically couldn't score against anybody. He was the only little bright ray of hope that we had during that first horrible season. That was the first part of last season. So I won't take anything away from him because I think that's very important to take into context, that he played with no one. That's not to say that if he had played with, like, I don't know, Messi or like Lewandowski now, obviously he's not an A+ player, but I think he's a good B-, B+, whatever, however you want to like fit him into that mold. But sadly, then when we got Ferran, when we got Aubameyang, he got injured at the latter part of the first half of that season. And then the second part of that of last season, he was coming back from that injury. I think he got injured again when he came back and whatnot. So he wasn't able to like get into the fold with the new mix of like Aubameyang, Ferran, and whatnot. And then this season, obviously, coming in Lewandowski, Dembele being fit, Rafinha, Ansu Fati being fit, he was relegated to what, the fifth, sixth forward in that line, and it's understandable at his age. He wants to play right now, so I don't fault him for like quote unquote forcing a move to an Atletico Madrid side that literally is lacking goals, and he might be able or should be able to provide that to a certain extent for that team. So I don't hold any grudge with Memphis whatsoever. He came in possibly at the worst time he could have, at the worst time, I think, in the last 20 years for Barcelona. Mm-hmm. And I think he did fairly well, taking into consideration who his attacking partners were during his time at the club, especially from August 2021 till December 2021.
Yeah. I'm 100% with you. I think B is the right answer because, as you said, if not for him and some of the performances he put in last fall, instead of 9th when Xavi took over, Barcelona would have been in 14th or 15th place. They would have been closer to where Sevilla is this year. Like, that's how bad it could have been for Barcelona. And then once you start losing that much, it dictates who you are in a whole season, right? And then it gets real nasty, as opposed to last season where they still finished second. And yeah, Memphis got hurt, wasn't a part of it. And then this season, it's a little bit different than the Samuel Umtiti case, right? Because while Memphis Depay was saving himself for the World Cup, he kind of was fully healthy, right? So it wasn't like he was like putting off surgery or something like that. He chose to just sit out and say, hey, I know where I am on the depth chart. And then all indications from Xavi were not that he was some kind of cancer in the locker room, but that Xavi kind of fought for him, and then he didn't want to be a part of Barcelona. And it sounds like Xavi took that a little personally, or maybe the club. You know what Barcelona is. They always take a little personally if you don't want to sign up for the Blaugrana. And I mean, Xavi used to say it in the past when other players were 50-50 on Barca, he'd say the same thing that Johan Cruyff used to say. If you don't want the colors, then we don't need you. And it sounds like that's a little bit of where Xavi's relationship with Memphis went in like the last week, where it sounded like Memphis was pushing his way out. And obviously the club would have had to jump through hoops to figure something else out to get something back for him. So I think as far as even the number, 3 to 5 million euros, like people are saying that Atletico Madrid once again is fleecing Barcelona. I mean, not really. Like the Griezmann thing was about Barcelona's desperation. Even David Villa, Villa was all about, getting fleeced because it was all that he was done, and he had so much left in the tank that we now know, right? And then even Luis Suarez, like with all that he had left in the tank, but that was one of those unfortunate circumstances that I said at the time, was that Barcelona had to move on from some of their veterans, and Luis Suarez had to be top of that list, but he still had a lot left to give Atletico Madrid because of the team that was built around him in a way that Barcelona were not built to defend for him. So it was circumstantial at the time. Yeah, and I don't think where Atletico Madrid sits in the table behind Barcelona and having just beaten them in the Liga less than 2 weeks ago, it doesn't seem like they gave Memphis to a direct rival. And also in his, as you said, that contract he took for Barcelona was a bit of a favor to Barca, where, again, the wages were fair, but to take a 2-year deal last season, it was very much I'm going to bet on myself in my prime. Like, he could have fought for a 4 or 5 year deal at somewhere else that's not necessarily Barcelona, but that is, Barcelona adjacent in a Champions League club. He could have fought for a 4-year, 5-year deal, but he took the 2-year deal. He bet on himself because he is 28 years old. So he is in his prime, and he can get some kind of big number offer now with his contract running down. And that's what he's going to get from Atletico Madrid, because now he's got a contract renewal for a few more seasons, and now he's taken care of until he's 32 years old, which for a player who's had a lot of injuries like that, you understand why he was fighting right now so hard that he could not only shore something up now, but now he knows his future for the next 6 months and doesn't even have to be a free agent. It doesn't have to fight for a free, on a free transfer again somewhere else. So I think it works out for Memphis. And for the club, yeah, he was so far down the depth chart that 1 or 2 injuries are going to make you afraid for what Barcelona has. But not to say that's Barcelona's problem, but he did Barca a favor, and now it kind of has to come to roost. And the last thing I will say about Memphis, then we can actually move on to the Kessie, Brozovic stuff. But what I will say about Memphis, to kind of wrap that up, in that option to buy on, or whatever it is, a first option on the purchase of Yannick Carrasco, first options are a complete joke. Like, the only ones that ever catch my eye or make me raise an eyebrow is the ones for Angelo Gabriel of Santos, because that had something to do with like the legal ramifications of the Gabigol first option that came from Neymar. Like we're talking about 10, 15 years first options finally for this 17-year-old right now. But the way that goes with the first option is that if Angelo Gabriel, a 17-year-old or 18-year-old winger, or whatever he is from Santos, if he's going to come to Barca, he's going to come for 10 million euros or whatever Barca can actually negotiate and handle. But what we've already heard this week or last week is that those rumors are going to quiet because there are other teams now, especially in the Premier League with all that kind of money, who are going to just throw 30 million at him just for the possibility that he's the next whatever Santos winger, right? So even though Barca have a first option, the minute somebody comes in from the top rope with 50 million euros or 30 million euros for an 18-year-old, they're out of the race. So first options, especially with the disparity of revenue between the EPL and everybody else, but even other clubs who are financially sturdy like Bayern and Real Madrid. I mean, Barca just aren't going to be able to compete with. Doesn't matter if they have a first option or not.
No, I agree. And then the last thing I'll say about Memphis is that I don't blame him for saving himself for the World Cup, because he was our fifth, sixth on the depth chart.
Exactly.
Forward
it
line.
Like he wasn't a cancer in the locker room either. It sounded like he was just like hanging out, being like, I don't really need to come back. I'm fine.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, I think it would have been a little bit selfish from us all. Like, oh my God, Memphis, you need to play for us when we didn't need him. So it's like, dude, like I understand, like save yourself for the World Cup, whatever. Like you're not gonna like, what's the word that I'm trying to use? Like you're not gonna risk injuring yourself before the World Cup when you know you're the fifth, sixth option. I wouldn't have done that. I would have done the same thing as well. So at the end of the day, he gets to go from living in Barcelona to living in Madrid, which isn't too shabby. So I guess he won't mind that at all. He's playing for Atlético Madrid right now. I agree. They're not our rival whatsoever right now, especially this season. But it does. I'll say this. It kind of does. The thing is, I'm so fed up with Atlético Madrid. Like they've gotten the upper hand on us so much, like away from the pitch, that even though, like, it just bothers me that at first, like, it was reported that we asked for 7, which isn't that great of a sum, but it just bothers me that we asked for 7, and even then, they quote unquote get their way and get him for less than what we were asking for. So I understand that there were only 6 months left in his contract, yada yada. We wanted to save that part of the salary, get something in return when he came in for free and whatnot. I get it, but still, considering how many times they have gotten the upper hand against us, and it was just like, ugh.
Well, I mean, but it's Bartomeu though. Like Bartomeu destroyed Barcelona's leverage for 3 or 5 years. Like that's what happened. Like they don't have any leverage. They haven't had any leverage in any of the times, exception again with the Villa move. They haven't had leverage now against Atletico Madrid for going on 5 years, and it's like.
But even then, like with Laporta now, like we saw Griezmann. I know that's because of everything that was done before Laporta. But even then, like there was a 40 million buyback clause or whatever, however the hell it was, and then they got one up on us by not playing him by playing him only after the 60th minute. And then we're like, okay, just give us 20 instead of the 40. It's like, again,
that's like zero leverage. That like Barcelona, if that clause is not in there, that deal isn't done. And then Barcelona are in insane violation of their FFP, right? Like they were so desperate to get those wages off the books, they had to put those kind of clauses into all of these different contracts. It's insane. It's absurd. But yeah, moving on to the, we're going to actually quickly move on from a story that's just a rumor into that game, because I think Franck Kessie is going to be one of the main talking points of the Copa del Rey match that we just watched. And I find that the rumor, and why I call it a rumor and why I'm going to throw this away pretty quickly, is Marcelo Brozovic, a 30-year-old defensive midfielder for Inter Milan, who is rumored to be in a swap for Franck Kessie. I mean, that is a too good to be true kind of rumor. Like, you can't make me believe that Franck Kessie, who is barely playing on the fringes of Barcelona's first team and is like fighting for form, is going to be swapped back to the different Milan now, to Inter Milan, for Brozovic, who is the consummate pivot, the immediate starter in an Inter Milan side that are fighting, that also are not atop, but finished second in their Champions League group, are still in the Champions League. So you're going to lose a core piece of how you build your team. And as we remember against Inter Milan, and as I reminded about how that team is set up, they are set up to try to counter on the wings quite a bit. And he plays long balls out to the wings, long diagonals. That is his game. So Brozovic, who perfectly fits in what Inter's game plan is, why would they possibly get rid of him for another high interior that might not necessarily fit in the same way that Kessie doesn't fit at Barcelona? Yeah, it sounds very, very highly unlikely. The whole Memphis again and Joaquin Correa thing, because Correa only had 3 goals this season and was like kind of on the outs at Inter anyway. Like that one, you had me, but no, I just Brozovic should be great, but like this one I felt like was gonna die 2 days ago and it never did. It just like they keep it up, and I think we'll hear it to the end of January.
That I completely agree with you. It doesn't make it like it's too good to be true. Like it doesn't make end unless we don't know. There's something where we don't know economically about Inter and they want to get rid of it because I think I was just looking at it. I think he still has a contract with Inter until 2026. So it doesn't make any sense. They're still in the Champions League. Sadly, they're the ones that quote unquote knocked us out of the Champions League in the group stage. So they're still in it. Obviously, they probably don't think they're going to win it, but still in the Serie A, they're in 4th place. I think 10 points behind Napoli, who are in 1st. So it doesn't make any sense for them to swap their starting defensive midfielder for a backup CM interior, right interior, left interior in the Spanish world terminology for their starting defensive midfielder. So, but the thing is, you would have thought that something like this, where you and I think everybody, 90% of people, especially the Barcelona fans, go like, again, this is too good to be true. Like, why are we talking about this? But this hasn't died. Like, on the contrary, like today, I was watching Gerard Romero's Twitch stream, and they were asking him about Brozovic, and he was like, let's see, but I wouldn't put like I wouldn't kill this deal off. So if he's saying that, I know he likes to create a bit of like drama.
Listen, I will say, I was in the Laporta regime. We know that Romero is a bit more confident and has connections and is a little more believable. But I will say today, especially with the Danny Parejo stuff as well, he was kind of on one today. Like I think because he said the Gunnawan stuff for Man City. He said Parejo and he said Brozovic, and he was like, I think he was a little bit on one today. I don't know what it was. He had too much coffee, but like yeah, I think Romero depends on the day. And today was just one of those days when he had a bit too much of it. But I get your point.
Yeah, but if he's saying that, then this time around, like you said, with Laporta on board, it's clear that he has connections with Laporta's board, even though he wants to deny it and say that they don't give him any favors and whatnot. Like he's in good standing with them. Like he had Laporta on after the Super Cup win on his stream, so he has good connections with them. But this would be amazing because I would obviously this is a no-brainer, but I would rather have Brozovic as Busquets' quote-unquote replacement, short-term replacement, instead of like Danny Parejo. Like
it's just even age thing. Like Parejo 4 years ago would have made a ton of sense. Great, but he's also
33.
He's also a box-to-box midfielder too. Like,
exactly.
He's been quality. He's been great this year for Villarreal, and he fits them perfectly. But again, he's 32. He's going to be 33 or 34, whatever. And Brozovic he's at 30. So he does have like 2 years for Barcelona to find a fair successor. And you hope in 2 years they've figured things out financially and things are working out a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, on the other side of that, as we transition this game, the whole question from that and why that was all possible is Franck Kessie in 5 months' time, are you really going to throw him out in 5 months? Like, is that fair to Kessie? And is he that unsavable at Barcelona? And it's funny because this game, the Copa del Rey, as we transition here, was kind of both answers, right? In the first half, the first 45 minutes, I go, well, yeah, I mean, of course, like, it's not working. Like, it's not working for Franck Kessie at FC Barcelona. He's this fringe player when he's really close to being on starter wages. Like, that's why, he came on a free transfer. Great. But he did sign for pretty reasonable wages, and those are starter wages, and he's nowhere near going to be close to starting. Like, I understand that obviously De Jong, Busquets, and Pedri are just far away. They were probably always going to be starting over him, sure, but he's not even like competing for minutes. Like, it's not even a competition in that first half. But second half looked a lot more comfortable against a third division side in the Spanish league. So, like, and those are questions that are raised, but but Kessie was much better in the second half. And, I think the only real talking point here that we can debate, and we'll talk about the 5 goals if you want to, but the really only main talking point I think for me that's contentious would be, why did Pablo Torre, who Xavi did not talk about why he took him out at halftime, but why did Pablo Torre come out at halftime instead of Franck Kessie? And I think there's a probably easy answer here as well, but also like Xavi was right, because the minute Gabi comes on the field, he gets it all right. But I have my reasons. I want to hear yours first, actually.
Well, regarding Kessie, again, like the problem with these type of games against like a third division side is that it's a damn if you do, damn if you don't. So you're supposed to beat them comfortably, which we did. So kudos. But at the same time, you can't draw any conclusions from like the Kessies, the Pablo Torres, the Hector Bellerin, Eric Garcia, etc., because it is a third division team. So you did what you were supposed to do, but it's not a measuring stick for these players. Like, you want to see them against a top tier side. Not saying against the Bayern or anything like that, but like a first division side with Kessie, Pablo Torre, Bellerin, and whatnot. And it's a third division team, like you said. So if, again, it would be harsh to quote unquote send Kessie packing after 5-6 months, but I'm sorry, that is life. If you're able to get Brozovic for Kessie, which you got him for free, then that is an amazing deal for Barcelona that they can't pass up. And at the end of the day, if that is a possibility, and Xavi, according to reports, is going to talk to Kessie, even Kessie should know, like, it's not like you're going from Barcelona to, I don't know, Cadiz or Nottingham Forest. Like, you're going to freaking Inter Milan, which is a really good side in a league that you already know you can play in. You know the style of the league and whatnot. I know that it's like the rival of the team you were previously on, but like, in Italy, who cares? Like, in Italy, everybody plays for Inter. Everybody then plays for Milan or vice versa.
Everyone's been owned by Juve.
Exactly. Then they go to Juve and Roma and Lazio. Like, if there's a league in the world that you see players playing for every single team, that is Serie A. So I don't think, like, I've read somebody like, oh my God, so Kessie doesn't want to go to Inter because he played for Milan. Like, Kessie, I can assure you, he couldn't care less about that. But for Pablo Torre, honestly, I want to hear you, because I have no idea. I obviously, as you know, I watch every post-game press conference of Xavi. He didn't say anything about that. They didn't ask him about that. So I honestly I have no idea. So
I think it's unfortunate about the journalists not asking about Pablo Torre, but in the same respect, like, he is in theory number 23 or 24 on the, like, in the squad list. So it's like, why are you asking a targeted question at, I mean, who is the sixth midfielder, right? He is a promising future, yes, but he's a sixth midfielder. I think I'm going to be very apologetic and make a lot of excuses very quickly for what that first half was, why it was the way it was, and then why it all changed very, I think it's not to say simple, but one of that is that this is a club. I mean, when even Lewandowski, right? It felt like Lewandowski more than anyone else, because he was the one who was the carryover from the Spanish Super Cup. There were 10 changes other than that. So Xavi can say in a press conference all he wants that was not his secondary players, but that was his secondary players. Like, you don't make 10 changes if it's not like your backups, right? From a final that won you a trophy. So with the quote unquote backups, I think excuse number one begins there, that this is a club that going from, especially where Ceuta is located, they had to take a flight down to Malaga, and then they had to get on helicopters to go all the way, because it's part of that. It's that little strand in North Africa, right? That makes it difficult. So like, it's just a lot of weird travel, right? Gets you in a little bit of a funk, and then you get to the stadium, and as people could tell from the camera angles, and I could tell from my, you and I both, our feeds got cut, right? So then we had to find different feeds, because I mean, just the digs were there. And again, in broadcasting in that world, I've been at schools and colleges and places that I can't believe they have internet at this point in the middle of nowhere. So like, I would do them on like my laptop or sign into a student's whatever, like internet, like however you get the broadcast on the air, you do. And so with like, especially you and I have ESPN Plus here, like they have their production truck and they try their best, but if it's not happening, it's not happening, because you're in too secluded of a place. But all that said, like those are little excuses. And then obviously I think the emotional hangover from the Spanish Super Cup, that's another thing. And then I think the thing I always say about these Copa del Rey matches, like I always go back to that Ibiza match where I feel like, not say that was traumatic for me, but having Antoine Griezmann be the hero there and kind of wondering, that was like the first time I think for our 5 headlines, I was like, why is Barcelona so bad against this team that while they did go up that season, it was a third division side, they should have blown off the field. But I think when you're substituting these players in who aren't in form, there's a fair argument that like, hey, why can't you just go with the Barca B players or Barca Athletic players who are in the third division because at least they're playing regularly? Because a lot of these players like Pablo Torre has less minutes than a lot of those Barca Athletic players this season. But I know they're in the third division and Pablo Torres are coming in the first division with the first team. But still, like he's not in form. He's not playing. Kessie is not really playing. Like they are 70% of match fit. Bellerin has not played in what, like, I mean, has he played since the World Cup? Has he played in 2 months? Like,
I think he played. I think he played the first game against Espanyol or something like that. But
something like
if he
that.
played, yeah, it was just one game.
Yeah, and he's not in match. Eric Garcia has not played in 2.5 months. He didn't play the World Cup either. So Garcia, for him to be a bit slow to come into that game. Sergio Roberto has not played midfield other than that cameo the other day in the Spanish Super Cup. He has not played in midfield in a start for like 3 or 4 months or whatever it is since preseason. So there's a lot of factors go into that. But again, those can't be excuses when you're playing against a third division side and you're a first division side. Like the Intercity thing should have been a fluke. And
he played, my bad. Bellerin played against Intercity as a starter. So yeah, go by Rey again.
Great. So anyway, let's forget about that one. But trying to make it about what's actually happening on the field, I think it's not even an excuse, but the way Xavi set that midfield up almost to fail in that Pablo Torre and Kessie and Sergio Roberto with the wrong midfield together, because while individually, you know what they bring to the team, even Sergio Roberto, what they individually bring to the team makes sense. Like we see that Roberto, when just having to kind of shield and work with a runner like De Jong and either Pedri or Gabi and somebody else that's going to be a bit more vertical, he can hold it down fine. But none of the three are actual ball winners. They don't actually win those ground duels, like those 50-50s. And when you're trying to press the way Xavi was asking, again, another reason why I think was a big issue and why it all changed when Gabi came on, Barcelona's press was putrid in that first half. Again, it could be some kind of emotional hangover. It could have just been legs or whatever it was, but they were not ready to press. Like they did not have their first foray into the opposition's third until like I think I had the 19th minute is when they finally got things started. Or 13 minutes in, it was Bellerin who pushed the ball forward down that goal line when he had that nice little move there. Bellerin, highlight of his season. And then Rafinha had that tight angle shot at the post. But yeah, I mean, it took Barcelona a while. And to my count too, I mean, again, our stream was kind of in and out, but I had them turning Ceuta over cleanly in their own half, that being Ceuta's half, 20 minutes into the game. And by the time that had happened, Ceuta had turned Barcelona over and taken possession from them twice in their half in the first 10 minutes of the game. So clearly, Ceuta were up to the game. They were ready to go. Clearly, the comments that Xavi had made about the lucky draw like got to them, and they were ready to play. And credit to them, just like Intercity, they're ready to play. They weren't like Barca didn't press with enough. And then, of course, the big change, maybe his personality is something, but Gabi is an elite presser. He's an elite presser at any age, not just about that. He's an elite presser. So when you have Kessie and Torre, who both want to get forward and both want to be involved in attack, again, don't mischaracterize Kessie as who he is. Like he's in a kind of this attacking interior. Like that's more that what he wants to be, who he is. And when Barcelona are possessing the ball with a 3-2-5, that makes sense for him. But when you have Sergio Roberto being the pivot behind that 3-2-5, you don't have as much belief that pivot's going to win the ball. And he wasn't. Roberto wasn't winning the ball. That's how Ceuta was getting the other direction. So when Gabi comes on, the press, it's night and day. And then immediately the second goal was scored and Kessie was able to, I mean, how far upfield did Kessie intercept that ball for the easy score for Lewandowski, right? That only happens because Pablo Torre is off the field and Gabi is in behind him with Roberto then supporting, right? And that change, that tactical change, that switch was everything. And there is a firm argument that if you take off Torre instead of Kessie, you take off Kessie instead of Torre in that circumstance, almost the same thing happens. And you put Torre in the same position to succeed alongside Gabi. But I also understand, to kind of finish off this point, I understand why you take off the 19-year-old instead of Kessie. Because if Kessie is going to stay at the club, you do need Kessie to be bought in, and you do need him to be your fifth midfielder. as opposed to Torre, who, if you get him minutes, when you get him minutes, and you hope that maybe he has to go on loan next year, but he is still 19, still under contract for a while, and maybe he can figure things out, even in the offseason or in training, and he can make the most of some minutes. But you need Kessie, and you can't lose him at halftime against Ceuta. Like, you can't take Kessie off in that situation because you're going to lose that player.
Even if you want to give him away, which, going back a little bit to the Kessie Brozovic thing, like, now I know it was against a third division side, but now he got a goal. He was he got 2 assists. So like you're showing him in a good way at the end of the day. But I agree, like, when you play against these teams, it is what it is. Like, you're putting out a team that hasn't played together. The defense, you've got 2 center backs, Eric and Marcos Alonso. Dear God. Then you got Bellerin as a right back. Dear God. Jordi Alba. That's your defense.
That's his position. Yeah,
but that's his position, but he hasn't played well. Then that midfield, Julio texted me for the game. He's like, legit, I think this is the worst midfield I've seen in a lot of years, like as a starting midfield for Barcelona. And then they haven't played together as well. So you're throwing these guys who individually haven't gotten minutes throughout the entire season. Mm-hmm. Then on top of that, as a team, they haven't played together, because of course, if like individually they haven't played, then of course as a team they haven't played together. So they don't know each other. On top of that, you're playing against a team that's fiery. Those first minutes, like there was a foul on Eric. A very, very hard foul to start the game. There was a very hard foul on Rafinha. Like, it was a game that, like, you're playing, it's like when you're playing against your little brother, that he's going, like, really hard against you because you're the older brother. And you're like, dude, it's like, you're my little brother. Like, I don't want to punch you. I don't want to, like, push you that hard. And he starts pushing you, like, oh, you're going to play like that? Then I'm going to have to play like that. So you got to match the intensity, because that the quote-unquote lesser team, they may not have the talent, which they don't compared to Barcelona, but they're going to bring the intensity. Yeah. And they did. And then luckily it was the pitch was in good condition, because going back to that Ibiza game, that was a turf. It was turf. It wasn't even natural grass. So that ball was hopping like a rabbit during that game. I still remember it. So it's the perfect recipe, and that's the quote unquote the magic of the cup. Even that thing, like having to fly by plane and then on a helicopter, that's those little things great. That you're like, oh my God, we got to take a helicopter for this game.
Yeah, but I love it. Those inconveniences about the Copa are great.
Like, exactly. They're great. Like, from a neutral standpoint, they're lovely for storytelling and whatnot. But for the players, you're like, dear God, I got to take a freaking helicopter for this game as well. Yeah. So, of course, if you add everything, it, quote unquote, makes the perfect recipe for disaster, which luckily for us, it wasn't at the end of the day. But that first half was horrible to watch for a Barcelona fan. It just seemed like we wanted to run through the motions and just like half, you know what, a game against this side that they were up for it. They may not have the talent, but they were up for it. So it's, I don't want to say I would have rather faced Villarreal away, because I wouldn't, but it's like the famous like Star Wars. It's a trap, because it is a trap playing against these sides where you don't have anything to win, quote unquote. You have everything to lose. You're supposed to win. You're supposed to win by a lot with not your starting 11, with players that haven't played whatsoever during the entire season, that haven't played together. So it's like you throw all these things on top of that. Like the reason Lewandowski played was because he's suspended for the next 2 league games. Because if he wasn't, he wouldn't have played against Ceuta. So I'm just glad we got out of Ceuta. We didn't have to play extra time. Nobody got injured. So I was like, phew, that's it. But again, I can't draw any conclusions like with the Kessies, the Pablo Torres, the Bellerins, even Eric Garcia and Marcos Alonso, because they did what they were supposed to do. But I can't be like, oh my God, they had a great game, because it is a third division side. So it's the measuring stick that we want to see those guys is in a third division side. It's not a Bayern, a City, a good like a Valladolid, an Osasuna side, something like that. So it's I don't know. I'm glad we won, and we just did what we did. It's like we did what we had to do, and that's it.
Well, I will say, going all the way back to your big brother comment, my younger brother, is 6 inches taller than me. But I can tell you, even regardless of that, throughout the years, when it's time to compete, when it's time for those kind of things, like I have big brother syndrome, and even though he's got 6 inches on me, doesn't matter. But to your point as well, like kind of touching the goals very quickly, we had one by Rafinha. There was a second one, Kessie intercepts. Lewandowski finishes. Ansu gets the third, just on a long run forward. Kessie gets the fourth on the header, again, to go along with his 2 assists. And then Lewandowski gets the fifth. Eric Garcia, just interception. By that time, Ceuta was kind of just sitting on the field, and Eric Garcia was able to go like 40 yards on the dribble and find Lewandowski, who was given way too much time. And I think that's actually what sums up even like what we can take from it. The Ansu goal, people were saying it's vintage Ansu, all those things. And I don't want to downplay any of this goals. Like everybody knows, like, when Ansu does something good, like even if he sneezes and he wipes it all off his nose like perfectly, I'm gonna clap. Like it's just anything Ansu does that I'm like, okay, Ansu's feeling it. It's a good day, whatever. But I think I can't take too much from those goals because those are goals that just don't exist in the first division. Like the Rafinha goal, everyone's
That
like,
doesn't go in with it.
No, his first curler with his left foot, no, because that space that he was given. I mean, for starters, it wasn't even. I mean, they weren't even, that being Barcelona, overloading the left side. It was a slow rotation over to Rafinha's side. There was no help coming, and the help is always going to be coming in the first division. So no help. They put their left back on an island, and David Alfonso Romero really struggled with Rafinha. Obviously tonight, like it's not a fair matchup, right? And then so Rafinha winds up cutting it on his left foot. Again, no help comes for him, and then David Alfonso Romero does not close out to him. And he just has way too. You can't give Rafinha that kind of shot with his left foot. Like
even the strike, like a first division goalkeeper probably puts a hand on it
potentially,
and that goes wide. So
and then the second goal, again, Kessie, I mean, he turned him over almost on their own goal line. Like you expect that first division sides are going to clear that instead of giving it right to Kessie. So Lewandowski, an easy finish there. Well, it was actually a narrow window. That actually might have been like the highest level of difficulty of the second goal. Third one, yeah, Ansu isolated on the left, makes it look easy. One little fake. It wasn't even like a full head fake or full shoulder fake. It was like a shimmy, not even like a feint or whatever. And then he winds up opening up the space for himself, scores the goal. He actually could have had the brace, but the goalkeeper did make probably his best save of the night with his toe to save the brace for Ansu. So just Ansu gets one. Again, I hope it's important for him. Like that's now 3 goals in 4 matches. And I think for him, more than the other 4 goals, this just scoring a goal matters, right? Like getting a goal for Ansu at that point. And actually Rafinha, with how little he scored as well, I want to remind you, any goal for Rafinha might be something. But as we said, like, I don't think that goal gets replicated in the same way that Ansu is not going to have that kind of space to go 30 yards on a dribble and then be able to shoot. Like you get one or the other. You got to either pass it off when you get into that final third, or you're going to be the one taking the shot if you're Ansu. And then, yeah, Kessie, you already mentioned his goal, like just getting a header, really important for him. And then Lewandowski, we said, his 5th one. So like, and then even on the 5th goal, like again, Ceuta had basically given up. So Lewandowski gets it with his right foot, easy finish. Like he just aims it and boom, it's in the goal. And so all of those 5 goals, like not say they should have happened, but you do expect that when the quality of Barcelona is what it is against a third division side, and it's expected. So last little rant for you here, kind of going back to the Pablo Torre idea. But we saw Angel Alarcón make his debut. And for those who followed me for even now, I guess the last 2-3 years, you know that he has been, I'd say, a B+ to A- prospect for Barcelona. If Gabi is an A or an A+, right? Like that's what Gabi always has been. Balde was, I'd say, an A. Like there were worries about his injury stuff with his shoulders and stuff like that. But Balde was always one of the top left back prospects in the academy for going on the 8 years or so he was there. And then Gabi the same way. When he showed up, by the time he was in Pintel Bay, it was like, oh, this kid is like, we need to put him up the levels. Alarcón actually has not been promoted to Barça Athletic because he was out for like 14 months. So he had major injuries, and Alarcón, to explain him, it's unfortunate because Ferran Torres exists. But before Ferran Torres, when he was still at Man City, there was comparisons for Alarcón to Ferran Torres because he's very versatile, can play both as a winger. But it sounds like Xavi in training, when he saw Lamine Yamal and all those throughout the World Cup, where the U19 players, he felt like Alarcón was actually a center forward. And we saw him play right wing in this match, and he gets a little bit of time. But I think even if he didn't play, I had prepared my headline, not even my headline, but I prepared my little saying on that. And I think the same thing holds true. The rule of thumb, I think, generally to use for Barca and under Xavi is that they're a team, and Xavi's squad is a team that plays their youngsters but doesn't rely on youth, which is way different. And I think Koeman was the same way. Pedri, he improved Barcelona's chances of winning now. Gavi improves Barcelona's chances of winning now, hence why he came into the game at the 18-year-old. So I think Barcelona have played youngsters, and they have a really young squad with Araujo, and I mean, when Eric Garcia was a member of the rotation, like they do have a lot of sub-23 or younger players. Even Koundé is 24. But they don't rely on youth. Like they don't actually put young players in the first team who aren't ready for the first team in a position to fail. Like you could say that they did that a little bit, as you already mentioned, with Ilaix Comas when for Xavi's first game with Espanyol and Abde and Jukla. I mean, those actually Jukla has proven to be like he was right for that situation, but that's hindsight. But in those moments, I mean, they literally needed human bodies, and they put those kids on the field to see what was there, not to improve them, but just like because we had to get something, and I have to put someone out there. But yeah, for Alarcon, like I think it does say a lot, even that he got the 10 minutes, because again, Xavi, the way this team is constructed, doesn't need to do that unless he truly believes in him. And I think to try to take the positive of that is that I think I'm actually pretty optimistic when Xavi does let kids who aren't ready yet debut, like even Pablo Torre, because I say if he can let those kids debut, the ones who aren't actually helping in winning, does that make any sense? Like Ansu and Pedri and Gavi, like they help you win. So age doesn't matter. But for the ones where age does matter, and you're like, if we let this kid get some minutes now and figure some things out in 2 years' time, he could help the first team, or maybe next year he could help the first team. So Alarcon's not going to help the first team this year. But he could be the sixth forward, and if you need him late in the season against Ceuta or against Valladolid or against Sevilla, or the bottom of the Liga. So if you need him in those moments against those teams in the center of the Liga, maybe he can just fill out as a sixth forward later on. But right now, he's not going to like improve winning. So there's no reason for Xavi to play him. And I get that. Does that make any sense? Like that?
No, I agree because that's the.
But they don't like rely on them.
Because I think that's the perfect explanation for why Pablo Torre is not playing. I know a lot of people want to see him like get more minutes, but this season Xavi is in win now mode. He knows that he has to win trophies. He already won one, but let's be honest, he won the lesser one out of all the ones that we were fighting for. So he knows that he has to win. So he doesn't. Xavi isn't. Again, I know I'm gonna sound repetitive, but he's not gonna play Pablo Torre unless everybody gets injured or in a Copa del Rey match or anything like that. Because if he has everybody available, he's gonna put the players that he thinks right now give him the better chance at winning, and that is Gavi, Pedri, Frankie, Busi, even Kessie ahead of Pablo Torre. I know I would have loved to see Pablo Torre get more minutes. I think you too, and a lot of culés, but Xavi, he knows this is a business. If he doesn't win anything, which he quote unquote, I mean, he already won something, but if at the end of the day he just wins the Super Cup and he doesn't win the league, doesn't win Copa del Rey, doesn't win the Europa League, I think he's going to be on the chopping block during the summer, which I don't think they're going to fire him, but he could be. So he knows that there was talk about after how we won the Super Cup. Even he said it, that it was quote unquote a little bit of relief because of how they finally won something, especially with all these young, great players like Araujo, like Ansu, like Pedri, like Gavi. Even that means that it may not have been the Champions League. Obviously, it is not. It's not even the league. But it gives them that little bit of a taste of that. Now you know what it's like to win something. Now let's go out and win more. Don't get satisfied winning this. It doesn't end with the Super Cup. Now let's go win the league. Let's try and win the Europa League and whatnot. So he's in again. We gotta take that into consideration, and we gotta know Xavi is in win now mode because that's what's asked of him, especially by Laporta. So he's not gonna, unless he has to, which is the last resort. He's not gonna give minutes to Pablo Torre or somebody else of that nature because, like you said, Pablo Torre, sadly, He's not gonna help us win now this season. He may be able to do that next season or the season after that. But for Xavi, the only thing that he cares about right now is
Yeah.
this season.
Yeah, and then of course, whenever there's questions about the full squad and everybody believes that the next kid is the right kid, like so the Victor Barbera, who's completely lighting it up for the U19s and Barça Athletic right now. There was rumors this week that Club Rouge, just like they did with Choukla, maybe are going to throw the bag at him. And I can tell you that, like, being that his contract is winding down, they got him 3 or 2.5 seasons ago from CF Dom, basically for nothing. Like they didn't know who he was or what he was going to be, and he's just really figured it out and found it. And I think people saying like, oh, he'll be a backup. He can be Lewandowski's backup next year or something. And the goals at those levels say that, yes, that could be true. But I don't know. I think Xavi does make me second guess it because Xavi's smarter than us. So if Xavi's going with Alarcon at the U19 level, even though he actually has 12 goals and 5 assists for the U19. So he's doing well at the level he's playing, but not being selected for Barça Athletic because they have their own players, including Barbera. But I think it's one of those, if Xavi would believe in Barbera or believe that he was that player, then he would have Barbera there instead of Alarcon, right? Like there's something that says like, why did he pick that one over that one? And then it makes the fact that Barbera might not be around. They might even, I think he's going to stick around to help Barça Athletic. He's their leading scorer right now, but that might be around where, Xavi sees his goals coming, right? Like how are his, as I watched him before, like how are his goals coming? Barbera's goals come in a lot of different ways and a lot of different, pretty much every way. He can score. He's so versatile. He can score with his head, score with either foot, poaching, but he can score not really long range shots, but like striker goals. He scores striker goals. He's a really complete striker at the third division level. And I think there is an easy way for Xavi to look at him and look at that tape and say, I don't think not any of that, but some of that stuff's not going to translate. Those header goals might not translate to the first division. The space he's finding to get those shots off might not be translating, right? So it's like, if he has questions about a player, it's one of those things where you got to trust Xavi in that case. And then again, why he would select Alarcon, what potential does Alarcon have? Like we know that he's dynamic, versatile, and sometimes that's what Xavi wants in a young player. So last thing real quick, Rafa, here before we get out, we put that Copa del Rey 5-0 win to bed. The Femení, they were actually the Barca team with the match today. Like it wasn't the Copa 5-0. Like that one was, especially the first half of that one. But for the Femení, they had a 3-1 extra time win today in the semifinal of the Spanish Super Cup over Real Madrid. Real Madrid have spent the money and they're kind of earning the El Clásico moniker. Like Atletico Madrid are falling behind on their Femenino. So, got to give it to Real Madrid to be proper El Clásico. So Spanish Super Cup for the Femení, not say they don't really care about it, but I remember 2 seasons ago in that tremendous treble winning season, they lost and let their foot off, and they're like, that didn't happen. Like, you know what I mean? It's middle season. Let's move on. Let's win it when the trophy season comes, right? But that felt like a trophy winning performance from this team. It was, Pina had a really great goal because Claudio Pina is awesome. If anybody,
I saw that goal. That was an amazing goal.
Yeah, she's awesome. And then Irene Paredes got Barca down to 10 women though with 2 yellows, which is not great in the 59th minute. And then Real Madrid goes and ties it up, and it goes extra time. And obviously Barca would always love to avoid extra time, but they're in it anyway. And even though Madrid played well, Lucy Bronze, against the run of play, gets fouled. Mariona scores the winner from the penalty spot, and then they get an extra one. That does Barcelona, and they put Madrid away for good. But as far as that kind of match goes, right, it's like you bite your nails and you go, I'm kind of caught between two minds. As much as it's like, the Femení, I do expect them. Like, I want them to dominate everybody, win a Champions League, and just be on top of the world. Like, I want them to crush teams, step on their throats to the point where they're picking up just a lot of fans. Like, I want them to be so dominant that especially like young girls and young women are like, yeah, that's the team I want to follow. Like, I want more Kool-Aids to follow the first team for the men and the Barça Athletic and the Femení, whoever, right? That's always my stance here. And so I want the Femení to just dominate Real Madrid in El Clásico. But the other part of me, the part of me that has to market a podcast and works in content creation and all this stuff, is like, if El Clásico is a real thing from the Femení side, like, we know the financial disparities in the WSL, which is the Women's Super League in the UK, and La Liga. Like, whatever the issues of the money discrepancy is between the EPL and the Liga, take that on the women's side of it and make it like 20 times worse. Because again, we know about like all the things behind the scenes that the women just, they don't have access to. Like they just don't, like Barca does, because Barca pays for those things. And they were really ahead of the curve when it came to Spain. But the rest of those Spanish teams, like way behind. And then Real Madrid is trying to do a little bit. So I think it's really good for Spanish women's football if there is some kind of game. Like if there's an event, if there's something to look forward to beyond like, oh, Barcelona might get upset today because the team that they're playing, they should just thrash, which they have done for the last 2.5, 3 years.
I agree with you, but at the same time,
I said two. Like you don't even have to. You can sit on the fence with me. I'm saying like I'm caught between two minds there. Like I don't
because I agree with that, but at the same time, I just want them to win everything as much as they can, because eventually, I don't know if the rest of the league will catch up with us.
For sure.
But you would figure that Real Madrid eventually, money-wise, I don't know if that'll be short-term, medium-term, or long-term, but eventually they'll figure it out and make it more competitive. So let's try and do on the women's side what Madrid did on the men's side when they were able to create that gap, especially during the Di Stefano era, when they were miles better than everybody else and won those, what was it, 5 Champions League in a row or something like that. So they were able to create that gap. And then when we wanted to catch up with them, they already had those 5, 6. Obviously, they made the gap even longer now. But let's try and do that to them on the women's side. Let's just win as much as we can. When we get Alexia back, let's try and win as many Champions Leagues as we can, as many leagues as we can, and as many Copa de la Reina as we can. Because let's be honest, Real Madrid are Real Madrid. And now I don't know if the other teams, Atletico Madrid and whatnot, are going to catch up with Barcelona. But it's not out of the realm of possibilities that Real Madrid can catch up to Barcelona Femení from a money standpoint eventually. So if we can create a gap, I've always been like that. Let's just step on their throat, cut their throat, and just because then they're gonna do that to us eventually if they have the chance, especially after all these years of dominance, which they would love the chance to just dethrone Barcelona and quote unquote stick it to them how the Barcelona Femení has been doing and is still doing.
I think with Madrid, it's very much like the PSG did to Lyon, where it's like that meme where you look behind you and then it looks like it's super far away, and then all of a sudden they're right on top of you. And the signing of Caroline Ware is kind of that. Like the Scottish international, she is a legitimate somewhere between superstar and star. And I actually would probably argue superstar in a modern game if like the Scottish national team was a bit better and you could see her and you could see them on like international stages a bit more. Because Caroline Ware is like, that was a great signing for Real Madrid, and they're going to have more of those each and every offseason. Like it's just the gap is going to get tighter because Barca can only put 11 on the field. And the other tough thing with the women's game too is like if you got, I mean, they really go 15, 16 deep of really good players, and not everybody gets the minutes. And like to bring this whole podcast, we end it full circle. I mean, you could have a player like Memphis and you sign him for a great deal and it looks great, but then all of a sudden you bring in Robert Lewandowski and Memphis is like, what the heck? Where'd my PT go? You know? and that's what happens. So it can happen in the women's game, happens in the men's game. But it didn't happen here. I felt like I took a bit of playing time. I got a little ISO ball today, Rafa, but you held your own. You definitely did what you had to do. So Rafa, everybody can hear more from you. Of course, follow him on YouTube, follow him on Twitter, across all the different platforms,
and even Twitch,
and even Twitch. We say so. I think Twitch is actually the one place you can't find me, but one of the new places you can find me is on TikTok. So that's the only one I'm going to mention at the end of this show today. But you know the rest of them: Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Patreon and YouTube and Discord and all that stuff. So thanks so much for listening to the show. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Forza Barca.